You said, so I've been talking to lawyers, right? And one of the things that is notable, right, is things get... Doris Cordell served 19 years as a judge, including over a dozen on the Superior Court of California, author of Her Honor, My Life on the Bench, What Works, What's Broken, How to Change It. Harry Litman served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice, is now a legal affairs columnist for the Los Angeles Times, and both join me now. Judge Cordell, let me start with you because I'm particularly interested in how you think of this as a judge. I mean, there is a lot of discretion given to judges over the timing of these things. You have a very unusual case here for a number of reasons, not just the ex-president who's been indicted, but the campaign calendar. How do you think is a fair way to evaluate a schedule, and how would you be approaching it were you this judge?
No trial judge with any experience who is assigned a case gathering this much attention, such a high-profile trial, would ever do anything in a haphazard manner. So when Judge Chutkan came forward and said the trial date is March the 4th, you better believe that she gave it a lot of thought. She has experience as a public defender, so she understands what defense attorneys have to deal with in terms of going through documents. But be sure, she gave a lot of deliberation to this, and I bet you she may have consulted with other judges on the bench to kind of put together what is the fairest way for both sides, understanding full well that the defense is entitled to due process, the time to put the case together. So when she came out with this, it wasn't like, oh, come out on the bench and, oh, I'll just have a compromise date between what each side wants. That did not happen. Trust me, she put in a lot of thought in coming up with this trial date. And it's a date that's firm. Now, will it change? It could. Someone could get sick. Things can happen. But if the date is changed, it isn't going to be changed to 2 years out.
Yeah, she said this during those arguments. She said this to John Lauro. I will say you and I have a very, very different estimate of the time that's needed to prepare for this case. But Mr. Trump will be treated exactly with no more or less deference than any other defendant would be. Lauro, at one point, and Harry, I'd love to get your response to this, seems to be sort of flagging an issue for appeal, right, already in this hearing. He says, we will not be able to provide adequate representation to a client who's been charged with serious offenses as a result of that trial date. The trial date will deny President Trump the opportunity to have effective assistance of counsel in light of the enormity of this case. Of course, effective assistance of counsel is something that you can use for a post-conviction appeal. What do you think about him using that language in that context, Harry?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And he was already in a bit of a hole with her in this hearing. She said twice, turned down the temperature, and he had proffered that outlandish proposal to go 2 years out. So he is, without doubt, saying to her, you are violating the Constitution, Your Honor. And of course, we will comply, but you're violating the Constitution, and we're going to bring this to the Court of Appeals. All of those things. I really want to second one thing that Judge Cordell just said. Remember the very first day how there were several judges of that court who showed up, including the chief judge. I think it's quite clear that the whole court here, each of which has dealt with hundreds of cases under and has including appeals, is really cohesive and thinking together of this as a kind of test of the court, and she absolutely can rely on her colleagues to reach a considered decision of what will hold up against a court of appeals. The final thing is to say that while she did note the speedy trial interest, it's clear she led, again, as the judge has just indicated, with the due process rights of the defendant. She's not going to get in the trap of suggesting that they are pushed back, below the due process line because of the need for speed. That comes first, and that's just what she said.
So Judge, you said, so I've been talking to lawyers, right? And one of the things that is notable, right, is things get delayed all the time. I mean, this stuff can move very slowly, right? And it could be any number of reasons, right? One of the lawyers had heart surgery, or, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that can happen, right? What's clear here, what's evident to everyone, and I think Judge Chutkan has been very clear about this, is there's a strong public interest in a swift trial. Donald Trump and his lawyers don't want a swift trial, right? So the question now is, like, what can they do to throw sand in the gears? What would you be anticipating if you were that judge?
Sure. When a judge presides over pretrial motions, it's the opportunity for the trial judge to size up who the parties are. How are they going to behave? Who's going to engage in theatrics? Who's going to be rude or maybe not want to follow the orders? And what I did on the bench when I had a high-profile case and I knew that there were some issues, this is what I do. You have the talk. It's the judicial talk. And the talk is very simple. You look the litigants and the lawyers, all of them, dead in the eye, and you say to them, and this is what I did when I presided over cases, I am going to give you the fairest trial you have ever had. And you are going to give me your respect, and you're going to follow my orders. Are we clear? And generally, I would hear from both sides, yes, Your Honor, then we would move on. So it may be soon that Judge Chutkan, when these attorneys start again about maybe the trial date, to have the talk, the judicial talk. It certainly worked for me, and I'm not the only judge who has done this, especially when you're a female judge, who sometimes we don't get the respect we should be getting as opposed to a male judge, and also being a judge of color. So this combination is such that we have to make sure we are in control of the proceedings. So I encourage the judge, if she has to do so, and maybe she's already done it, to have the talk early on.
Yeah, I mean, that seems, I mean, she has, by all accounts, and I have not been in that courtroom, seemed to really control the space authoritatively. Obviously, there's a judge who is both respected and has some real experience. This is, Judge Aileen Cannon down in Florida is going to be presiding over her third criminal trial or something like that. So this is a totally different universe. I guess what I keep coming back to, Harry, and you said this, and other folks have said this. I've been, watching coverage about this. That this is pretty hard. It's pretty set in stone. It might slip for small logistical reasons. What are they going to try to do to make that not be the case?
There are two kinds of delays, Chris. One would be the week at a time someone's, just had an emergency surgery or this very motion, or we want an evidentiary hearing. And I think this March date builds in some of that, a month, 2 months, and still the nation's very strong interest in having a verdict before election is served. The big way of eating up time is an appeal, and that, for example, I think will be happening in Fulton County, where removal motions, and you can bet that Trump will bring it at the last minute, are appealable. But the different actions to challenge the whole case here that Lauro has telegraphed, that it's pretextual, that it's reprisal for Hunter Biden, that Trump has immunity, none of them at least has automatic right of appeal. It will be up to Chutkan. So assuming she's a strong gatekeeper here, then I think they have to go in little bite-sized chunks, and that can't get them far enough. So the big issue is, can they get an interlocutory appeal to the Court of Appeals? Even then, by the way, the Court of Appeals, I think, is primed for Trump's delaying tactics. But absent that, there just is no, I don't think they're going to be able to really eat up a lot of time. Yeah,
get an interlocutory appeal with an appeal by right pre-trial, right? Can they find something that gets them there?
Which I think they do not have, discretionary interlocutory appeals if Chutkan agrees.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Ladoris Cordell and Harry Litman, thank you both. Appreciate it. With the Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination getting arrested all the time, Trump's subordinates in Congress are doing everything they can to try to help him out, including a plan to shift attention by impeaching the current president. In fact, today, Donald Trump publicly ordered the House Republican caucus to get it done, writing, quote, "Either impeach the bum or fade into oblivion. They did it to us." One of the most outspoken members of that caucus, Matt Gaetz of Florida, is now saying he doesn't even believe the House needs to vote to open an impeachment inquiry. And according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, Speaker McCarthy is apparently taking direction from Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump.
That leaves the decision to Kevin McCarthy ultimately. Are you confident he's going to go with the impeachment inquiry this fall in September?
I am confident, and the reason why I'm confident is we had a House GOP call yesterday, and that was his big push on the call. So I think if we were to have the vote today, right now, Kevin McCarthy would be one of the first ones to vote yes.
Now, there is just one small problem with this plan. Republicans have no evidence that Joe Biden committed a high crime or misdemeanor. You don't have to take my word for it. As one unnamed Republican lawmaker told reporters, quote, "There's just no evidence, and they can't impeach without that evidence. I don't think the evidence exists." Others have gone on the record with their concerns, including Don Bacon of Nebraska. Quote, I think before we move to an impeachment inquiry, there should be a direct link to the president in some evidence. So they have no evidence, no facts, nothing to suggest the president committed any high crime or misdemeanor. But they're going to barrel ahead with an impeachment anyway. What could go wrong? David Jolly is a former Republican congressman of Florida, and he joins me now. What is your read of the calculus in the Republican House caucus and Kevin McCarthy on this?
I think this goes all the way back to the 15 votes to become Speaker. Chris, you know, I sat at the table with you during the Speaker vote, and I said I didn't think Kevin McCarthy would be able to get the votes to become Speaker, largely because I underestimated his willingness to sell the gavel to the MAGA crazy crowd. But it was apparent then that part of his corrupt bargain with his caucus was a willingness to impeach Joe Biden. He wouldn't come right out and say it, but we know that many in his caucus wanted to move towards impeachment. I believe Kevin McCarthy made that promise 8 or 9 months ago, and this has always been the plan, so he's headed there. But I think it also speaks broadly to the Republican Party politics, internal politics, even outside of the House, where they are convinced through Fox News and through just a Republican echo chamber that the Biden crime family is real. The problem is it requires this broad innuendo gap for them to jump from a complete lack of evidence to pinning it on high crimes and misdemeanors. The evidence isn't there, but Kevin McCarthy has shown us it doesn't matter. He will sell out the institution, sell out the country as well the second time around.
I want to be clear here, too, just to take a second on the evidence. I mean, it's not even that the evidence isn't there. The thing that they sort of speculate about, right, that they through hearsay and ... and someone told someone, is a wild accusation that this Joe Biden, as sitting vice president, was taking 7-figure bribes, okay? That no one has figured this out all this time. And this just happened and no one realized it. But also, and this is crucial, it has nothing to do with his current presidency. Like, it's all about, am I missing something? Like, there is no actual tangible thing on that they are even pretending to allege exists.
That's right. And in many ways, their allegations have actually been disproven, because at the heart of the Hunter Biden investigation that's been going on for 5 years, the Department of Justice, was this notion that somehow the influence peddling reached from the president's son to the vice president himself, and yet there was no evidence of that. If there had been, you better believe there would have been charges brought against the son on that and evidence about the president produced. None of that has been produced. And so, look, part of this is the elevation of this new group of Republicans that are devoid of ideology, and this is simply now a witch hunt caucus. We are seeing that, but the evidence just simply is not there, and they fall on their face every time they make an accusation.
Here's the thing about the politics of it. I remember, obviously, I was sitting at this desk for all through the Trump years and watching Nancy Pelosi often really slow walk impeachment. Al Green, member from Congress, was like, look, there's stuff right now, day one. And again, I think there were, I think on the emolument stuff, I think there were a number of places where they had plausible cases, right? The fact that he was clearly sort of cross-pressured and had conflict of interest as the sitting president. Put that aside. Pelosi's concern was about the politics of it. I just don't see the 10 most vulnerable House Republicans wanting to vote for a Biden impeachment. Maybe I'm crazy. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. But, I don't even think they have the votes for that, which is why I guess he's going to do the inquiry without the vote.
Well, and the easier vote is the opening the inquiry, right? Because even a moderate swing district, right, a Republican could say, well, we should at least go on a fact-finding expedition, even if they're ultimately a no. In this case, there aren't the votes even to open up the investigation. So, look, this will be an overreach should they pursue it. They are clearly doing it at the direction of Donald Trump to distract from Donald Trump. Chris, I served with Kevin McCarthy. He has always been a vacuous individual, never one deep in policy, always about the politics. He knows every congressional district. But I did not realize then how unprincipled he was. This is a manifestation of his lack of principles to say, I'm willing to shred the integrity of the House, to sell out all of the history. What you spoke of, the slow walking of Nancy Pelosi, to chase facts and be careful with the politics. He doesn't care about any of that. He cares about...
I hope you are okay.
Yeah.
very simple. Now I have to you have to
Hole and fill is harder than you think. Size does matter.
We only got one star. Let's play this episode again.